Well, from classrooms to events out of the classrooms, Bexar County schools are getting new guidance now on how to handle the coronavirus pandemic.
Erica Zucco joins us now with the changes, Erica, that officials would like the schools to make.
Yeah, Barry and Sarah, they have really seen an increase in cases after the students came back from winter break, as is really to be expected. And they're asking people not just to think about what's happening in the classroom, but also outside the classroom, limiting those gathering and events that might normally occur and really discouraging against those contact sports as well. The new guidance for schools, the most updated guidance that they released last night, includes that they should be testing at least 25% of staff at least once a week, smaller class sizes, defer contact sports for now, and colleges should be operated virtually. There was a large spike in cases diagnosed in Texas schools after winter break. Metro Health says when cases rise in the community, it follows that they're more likely to rise in schools. So that's why taking those safety measures outside of school was something that they were trying to do to keep schools up and running safely. They say that we're still in the red zone, which means that classes should be limited and at-risk students should be prioritized. But as you guys know, many schools are still operating above that guidance level, feeling that it's best to have students in the classrooms. So if that's the case, they're asking that they do it as safely as possible. Metro Health's new guidance comes in response to new guidelines from the CDC and the Journal of the American Medical Association. It also shares advice for spaced out classrooms. So bottom line here, the big thing here is just really emphasizing that mass gatherings and events should not be held even if they're related to the school setting. Reporting downtown, Erica Zucco, KENS 5 Eyewitness News.